The sound of a gunshot can change everything in an instant. One moment, Luciano Benedetti sat at his usual corner table, commanding the room with just his presence. The next, he lay on the cold restaurant floor, blood seeping through his expensive suit, his eyes searching desperately for help as chaos erupted around him. But no one came forward. No one dared. No one except Serena. She wasn't supposed to be working that section tonight. She wasn't supposed to witness the feared Mafia boss taking a bullet to the chest, and she certainly wasn't supposed to run toward him while everyone else ran away. Yet something pulled her to him. Maybe it was the way his eyes found hers across the room, not the eyes of a monster, but of a man facing his mortality, those dark eyes locked onto hers, so pleading silently as his security team scattered in confusion. "I don't know you, but please don't let me die," he whispered, his voice barely audible as blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. Serena's heart pounded against her ribs as she knelt beside him. The floor around them turned crimson, soaking through the knees of her uniform. She'd heard the whispers about Luciano Benedetti, the ruthless crime lord who ruled the city with fear and blood, a man who had never shown mercy. But the vulnerability in his eyes made her pause. Without thinking, she pressed her apron against his wound, her hands trembling but determined. "Stay with me," she commanded, surprising herself with her own strength. His bodyguards were useless, panicking or suspiciously absent. The restaurant had emptied in seconds, leaving only the two of them under the dim chandelier light. As she applied pressure to his wound, Luciano's hand weakly grasped hers. "Why?" he managed to ask, confusion crossing his pain-stricken face. The truth was, Serena didn't know why. All she knew was that she couldn't watch someone die, not even him. Not when she could help. In the distance, sirens wailed, but they both knew the police couldn't help a man like him. "We need to move you," she said, her mind racing ahead. "Who did this to you?" His eyes darkened. "Someone I trusted." As Serena helped him to his feet, supporting his weight against her small frame, she didn't realize she had just changed both their destinies forever. She didn't know that the man who betrayed Luciano was watching from the shadows, marking her as his next target. She didn't know that saving his life would endanger her own. "This is just the beginning, and I know you're already invested. You can't leave these characters hanging, can you? Subscribe now so you won't miss how this story unfolds. You're already here. Don't turn away now." Luciano's eyes fluttered open to unfamiliar surroundings. A small apartment with peeling wallpaper and the faint smell of lavender. Pain shot through his body as he tried to move, the memories flooding back in fragments. The restaurant, the gunshot, the waitress. "Don't try to sit up," came a soft voice from the doorway. "You'll tear the stitches." Serena stood there, still wearing her blood-stained uniform, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept. Her hands clutched a fresh bandage, steady now compared to their trembling the night before. "Where am I?" Luciano demanded, his voice hoarse but commanding even in his weakened state. "My apartment," she answered simply, approaching him with caution. The hospital wasn't an option, was it? He studied her face, searching for motives. In his world, no one helped without expecting something in return. Yet, her expression remained open, honest, something he hadn't encountered in years. "You're lucky I found you when I did," she continued, changing his bandage with surprising skill. "You would have bled out in minutes," Luciano winced as she cleaned his wound. "Why did you help me?" The question came out harsher than intended. "You know who I am." Serena paused, her eyes meeting his directly. "I know what people say about you, but in that moment, all I saw was someone who needed help." Something stirred within Luciano, an unfamiliar feeling he couldn't place. Before he could respond, the door burst open. Enzo, his right-hand man, filled the doorway, his hand resting on the gun inside his jacket. His eyes narrowed when he saw Serena. "Luciano," he said, ignoring her completely. "We need to talk about what happened." The tension in the room thickened instantly. Serena stepped back, but not before Luciano caught the flash of fear in her eyes. "Leave us!" Enzo commanded her, his tone leaving no room for argument. Serena looked to Luciano, who nodded slightly. As she left the room, Luciano couldn't help but notice how Enzo's eyes followed her with suspicious intensity. "She saved my life," Luciano said once the door closed. "She's a liability," Enzo countered. "She knows too much already," Luciano's jaw tightened. "I owe her a debt." Enzo moved closer, lowering his voice. "Someone betrayed us last night. Someone knew exactly where you'd be." What Enzo didn't say, what Luciano could see in his eyes, was the unspoken question. Could it be her? But Luciano had seen the genuine shock on Serena's face when the bullet hit him. The instinct to help had been real. Whatever game was being played, she wasn't part of it. In the other room, Serena pressed her ear against the door, her heart racing. She'd gotten involved in something dangerous, something that could cost her everything. Yet when she pictured Luciano's eyes, filled with pain and vulnerability beneath the hardened exterior, she knew she couldn't have done anything differently. What she didn't know was that outside her apartment building, a black car was parked across the street. Inside sat a man watching her windows, waiting patiently for his moment to strike. You've seen how high the stakes are now, but this is just the beginning. What happens next will change everything. Subscribe now and stay with us. You won't want to miss what's coming. Can you walk away now, knowing you've come this far? Days passed as Luciano recovered in Serena's small apartment. What started as awkward silence gradually shifted into something neither of them expected: a connection. "Why did you become a waitress?" Luciano asked one evening as Serena changed his bandages, her touch gentler than anyone who had ever tended to his wounds. She smiled sadly. "My mother got sick 3 years ago. Medical bills piled up. I dropped out of nursing school to work full-time. You were studying to be a nurse?" Suddenly her skilled care made sense. "Almost finished when life had other plans." She secured the fresh bandage. "What about you? Did you always want to become—" She hesitated. "A monster?" Luciano finished, his voice hard. Serena met his gaze directly. "I was going to say who you are now." Something in her honesty disarmed him. For the first time in years, Luciano found himself telling the truth about his father's death, about protecting his family's legacy, about the loneliness of power. "Sometimes I think about walking away from it all," he admitted, surprising himself. "What stops you?" "The bodies I'd leave behind." His eyes darkened. "In my world, exit strategies come with blood prices." Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock. Serena opened the door to find Enzo standing there, his expression cold. "I need to speak with you," he said, grabbing her arm and pulling her into the hallway. Alone. Once outside, Enzo's grip tightened. "You think you know him? You don't know anything." "You're hurting me," Serena said, trying to pull away. "Listen carefully," Enzo hissed. "Whatever you think is happening between you two ends now. Walk away while you still can." "Is that a threat?" Despite her fear, Serena stood her ground. Enzo's smile didn't reach his eyes. "It's a warning. Luciano's world destroys everything it touches." When Serena returned, Luciano noticed her trembling hands. "What did he say to you?" "Nothing important," she forced a smile. But that night, as Luciano drifted between sleep and wakefulness, he heard Serena crying quietly in the next room. Something protective stirred inside him. A feeling he'd long forgotten was possible. What he didn't know was that Enzo had already made a phone call, setting events in motion that neither Luciano nor Serena could stop. You've seen their connection growing stronger, but the danger is closing in. Can you really leave now, not knowing what happens next? Subscribe to stay with us on this journey, because trust me, what's coming will leave you breathless. Don't you want to be there when everything changes? A week later, Luciano was strong enough to stand without assistance. His world had been calling. Urgent messages about business matters, territory disputes, and loyal soldiers wondering about his absence. But he lingered in Serena's apartment, telling himself it was about recovery. Not about the way her smile made him feel, things he'd forgotten existed. That evening, they shared a quiet dinner, pasta she'd made from scratch, wine he'd had delivered from his personal collection. "When you leave," Serena said, breaking the comfortable silence, "what happens then?" Before Luciano could answer, the door crashed open. Enzo stood there, gun raised, eyes cold. "Luciano," he said, voice dripping with contempt, "you should have stayed dead." In an instant, everything became clear. The ambush at the restaurant, the missing bodyguards, the suspicious questions. "You," Luciano said, rising slowly. "It was you all along." Enzo smirked. "The great Luciano Benedetti, brought low by a waitress. The Visconti family thanks you for making this so easy." "The Viscontis?" Luciano's blood ran cold, his family's oldest rivals. "They offered me more than you ever could," Enzo said, aiming his gun at Luciano's heart. "Nothing personal, just business." Time slowed. Luciano saw Enzo's finger tighten on the trigger. He saw the gleam of satisfaction in the traitor's eyes. He saw death coming for him again, but this time there would be no escape. Then Serena moved. She lunged forward just as the gun fired, her body intercepting the bullet meant for Luciano. The impact threw her backward into his arms. "No!" The scream tore from Luciano's throat as Serena's blood soaked through her shirt. Her eyes, wide with shock, found his. In the chaos that followed, Luciano didn't remember grabbing his own gun from beneath the table. He didn't remember firing 3 perfect shots into Enzo's chest. All he remembered was Serena's body growing heavier in his arms, her breathing becoming shallow. "Why?" he whispered, cradling her face. "Why would you do that?" Her lips moved, forming words he couldn't hear. Blood bubbled between them. Her eyelids fluttered, then closed. Luciano had held dying people before. He knew the weight of death. And as Serena went still in his arms, something inside him shattered, something he'd never be able to put back together. What happens next will change everything. You've witnessed sacrifice in its purest form. Can you walk away now? Don't leave Serena and Luciano's fate hanging in the balance. Subscribe now to see if their story ends in tragedy or if there's still hope for redemption. After what you've just witnessed, how could you not stay to see what happens next? Luciano carried Serena's body through the rain, her blood mixing with the water that soaked his shirt. His men followed in silent procession, none daring to question the grief etched into their boss's face. For 3 days after that night, Luciano disappeared. The underworld held its breath, waiting. When he emerged, he was no longer the calculated businessman who had ruled with cold precision. He had become something else, something primal and merciless. "Find everyone connected to Enzo," he ordered his most loyal soldiers. "Everyone who helped the Viscontis. Everyone who knew and stayed silent." The city trembled as Luciano's vengeance swept through like wildfire. Men who had once been untouchable were found in alleys, in car trunks, in the harbour, all bearing the mark of personal retribution. This wasn't business. This was punishment. Luciano saved Carlo Visconti for last. The rival Don had believed himself protected by an army of guards in his countryside estate. He was wrong. "You took something from me," Luciano said, standing over the man who had orchestrated it all. Carlo spat blood. "The waitress? She was nothing. Collateral damage." Those were his last words. Later, standing alone in his penthouse, Luciano looked at his blood-stained hands and felt nothing. The emptiness remained. Serena was still gone. The violence had filled no void, healed no wound. He made his decision then. He would dismantle his empire, leave the life that had cost him the only person who had seen him as a man, not a monster. "For her," he whispered to the empty room. But miles away, in a secluded clinic on the outskirts of the city, Serena's eyes fluttered open. The private room was filled with flowers, a medical equipment beeping steadily beside her. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice barely audible. A woman stepped from the shadows, her resemblance to Luciano unmistakable in her dark eyes and strong features. "Somewhere safe," she said. "I'm Valentina, and my brother thinks you're dead." This is just the beginning. And I know you're already invested. You can't leave these characters hanging, can you? Subscribe now so you won't miss how this story unfolds. You're already here. Don't turn away, now. 6 months passed like a slow bleeding wound. Luciano stood at the window of his office, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The empire he had once ruled with an iron fist was crumbling by his own design. Properties sold, territories abandoned, alliances severed. His men whispered behind his back. They called him haunted. But they weren't wrong. Serena was everywhere, in the coffee cup left on his desk, in the faint scent of lavender that sometimes drifted through empty rooms, in the silence that followed him like a shadow. He would turn, expecting to see her, only to find emptiness. "The Gambino family is moving on our southern territory," Marco reported, the last of his truly loyal captains. "They think you've gone soft." "Let them," Luciano replied, his voice hollow. "Boss, with respect, you can't just walk away. They'll come for you, for all of us." Luciano knew Marco was right. His enemies circled like vultures, sensing weakness. 3 assassination attempts in the past month alone proved it. The life he wanted to leave wouldn't release him so easily. That night, he visited his mother, the only person who still spoke truth to him. "How you think abandoning power will wash the blood from your hands?" she asked, pouring him wine. "Power doesn't disappear. It transfers. Consider who will fill your absence." Her words followed him home, where he found an envelope on his bed. Inside was a single photograph. Serena, clearly alive, reading a book on a garden bench. The message scrawled across it: "Everything you love can be taken. Again." Miles away, Serena stared out the window of her gilded cage. The bullet had nearly killed her. Months of recovery had followed, all under Valentina's watchful eye. "Your brother thinks I'm dead," Serena had said once. "Why?" "Because you're safer this way," Valentina had answered. "You've seen what his world does to people he cares about." Every day, Serena wondered why Luciano had never searched for her. Had she meant nothing to him after all? The thought hollowed her chest more than the bullet ever had. What she couldn't see was the man watching the property from a distance, taking photographs to deliver to those who wished to use her against Luciano once more. You've seen how high the stakes are now. But this is just the beginning. What happens next will change everything. Subscribe now and stay with us. You won't want to miss what's coming. Can you walk away now, knowing you've come this far? The moment Serena found the locked drawer in Valentina's desk, everything changed. Her fingers trembled as she picked the lock, a skill from a childhood she rarely mentioned. Inside lay newspaper clippings, photos, and a single black ledger. The headline screamed, "Massacre at Milano Restaurant, 12 dead. Benedetti connection suspected." The photos showed Luciano younger, harder, standing over bodies. His eyes in those images weren't the ones she knew. "Find what you're looking for," Valentina's voice cut through the room. Serena didn't flinch. "You're his sister. You've been lying to me for months." "I saved your life," Valentina countered, stepping inside. "The doctors said you had minutes left when I brought you in." "Why keep me from him? Why let him think I'm dead?" Valentina laughed bitterly. "You think you know my brother? You saw him for a week while he was vulnerable. I've known him my whole life." She tossed a folder onto the desk. Inside were photos, men tortured, bloodied faces, execution-style killings, all bearing Luciano's signature. "This is who he really is," Valentina whispered. "This is what loving him costs." Serena closed the folder, her face unreadable. "You hate him." "I fear what he's become," Valentina corrected. "Our father's death broke something in him. The boy I knew disappeared. If you hate him so much, why save the woman who took a bullet for him?" Valentina's eyes softened. "Because you were innocent. And because I thought—" She hesitated. "I thought you might be his way back." Later that night, Serena stared at her reflection. The scar on her chest was a permanent reminder of her choice. Valentina's words echoed in her mind, but alongside them played memories of Luciano's gentleness, his pain, his truth shared in quiet moments. The man in those photos and the man she knew. Could they really be the same person? On her nightstand sat a phone she'd stolen from one of the guards. Tonight, she would make her choice. If you're feeling torn like Serena is right now, caught between what you've been told and what your heart knows, then you understand what's at stake. Can you really stop watching now? Subscribe to discover the truth alongside her, because we all deserve to know if love can truly redeem even the darkest souls. The fourth assassination attempt came at dawn. Luciano was ready. The sniper never saw Marco's countershot coming from the building across the street. One moment he was lining up his scope on Luciano's silhouette. The next, he was falling 12 stories to the pavement below. "That's the second one this week," Marco said, entering Luciano's office minutes later. "The Gambinos are getting desperate." Luciano barely looked up from the photograph in his hands. Serena. Alive. The image that had haunted him for days. "Who sent this?" he demanded, not for the first time. "We're still looking. But boss, there's something else. Your mother called. She says it's urgent." An hour later, Luciano sat in his childhood home, the weight of his mother's words settling on him like concrete. "Your father wasn't killed by the Russians like you were told," she revealed, her hands steady despite her age. "He was murdered by his own brother, your uncle Francesco." The revelation hit Luciano like physical pain. "Why tell me this now?" "Because you're dismantling everything your father built to protect us." Her eyes, so like his own, hardened. "And because Francesco's son has returned to claim what he believes is rightfully his." "Antonio." The name tasted bitter on Luciano's tongue. His cousin. So the man who'd been missing for 15 years. "He's allied with what's left of the Viscontis. They're coming for everything, the territories, the businesses." She paused. "And you, Luciano. They're coming for you." As if summoned by her words, Luciano's phone buzzed with a message. A video. His blood froze as he watched. Antonio Benedetti stood smiling at the camera, his arm around a terrified young man, Luciano's youngest soldier, barely 19. "Cousin," Antonio's voice purred, "I believe we have unfinished family business." The gunshot came before Luciano could look away. The boy crumpled to the ground. "For every day you continue dismantling our family's legacy, another dies." Antonio's smile widened. "Unless, of course, you're willing to discuss terms." Luciano's hand tightened around his phone until the screen cracked. The path out of his criminal life had just vanished. There would be no walking away, not while Antonio lived. His phone buzzed again. An unknown number. The message contained just 5 words. "It's Serena. I'm still alive. You've seen the truth begin to emerge now. The family betrayal, the impossible choices, the ray of hope when all seemed lost. How can you turn away when everything is about to change? Subscribe now if you need to know what happens next. Don't leave Luciano and Serena facing these dangers alone, not when you've come this far with them." Serena watched Valentina from the doorway, her body tense as she witnessed the secret phone call. Valentina's voice was low, urgent. "He has the photo. He knows she's alive." A pause. "No, he doesn't know where. Not yet." Serena's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd sent that text to Luciano hours ago but hadn't received a response. Now she understood why. "We proceed as planned," Valentina continued. "Once Antonio weakens him enough, we move. The girl is our insurance." The girl? Insurance? The words chilled Serena's blood. She slipped away silently, her mind racing. She'd believed Valentina's protection was genuine, a sister's attempt to shield her from Luciano's dangerous world. The truth was far darker. Back in her room, Serena pried open the loose floorboard where she'd hidden her findings. Letters between Valentina and Enzo dated months before the restaurant shooting. Plans. Discussions of taking Luciano out of the picture. They had been working together all along. A half-empty wine glass sat on her nightstand, the same wine Valentina insisted she drink each night for her health. The same wine that always made her sleep so deeply. With trembling fingers, Serena lifted a strand of hair from the glass. It wasn't hers. They were drugging her, keeping her compliant. The stolen phone felt heavy in her pocket. She pulled it out, dialing the one number she remembered from her time with Luciano. "Marco," she whispered, when a gruff voice answered. Silence then. "Who is this?" "Serena. The waitress. I'm alive and I need help." The line went dead. Had she made a mistake? Could Marco be working with Valentina too? 20 minutes later, as she packed a small bag with essentials, her window shattered. A rock wrapped in paper landed on her floor. North Gate, 2 a.m., car waiting. Outside, the guards patrolled the grounds in increased numbers. Something had changed, Valentina knew. As midnight approached, the compound erupted in chaos. The power cut out, alarms blaring, guards shouting. Serena seized her moment, slipping through shadows toward the North Gate. Freedom was 30 feet away when a hand grabbed her arm. "Going somewhere?" Valentina's face twisted with rage in the moonlight. "Are you feeling your heart race as Serena fights for her freedom? This is the moment everything changes and you're right here with her. How can you possibly walk away now, not knowing if she escapes? Subscribe now if you need to see what happens next. Don't leave her alone in this moment of danger, not when she's finally fighting back." 2 black SUVs cornered Luciano's car on the bridge at midnight. The ambush was professional, coordinated, 6 men with automatic weapons and nothing to lose. "Stay down," Luciano ordered his driver as bullets shattered glass around them. He'd survived worse. His gun felt familiar in his hand as he returned fire, movements calm despite the chaos. 3 men down in quick succession. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Marco. "She's real. Extraction in progress." The momentary distraction nearly cost him everything. A bullet grazed his shoulder, tearing through expensive fabric. Pain flared, but adrenaline pushed it aside. He finished what he started, 3 more bodies on the bridge. Across the city, Serena ran through the woods surrounding Valentina's compound, branches scraping her face. The sound of dogs barking grew closer. "Keep moving," urged the man beside her, Marco, who'd arrived just in time, knocking Valentina unconscious before she could raise the alarm. "They're tracking us," Serena gasped, her lungs burning. "They're tracking everyone," Marco replied grimly. "Antonio's men found our location. They're after both of you." They reached a clearing where a motorcycle waited. "This wasn't the plan," Marco muttered. "Car's been compromised." "I've never," Serena began. "No time to learn," Marco cut her off, helping her onto the bike. "Hold tight, don't let go." The engine roared to life just as flashlights broke through the trees behind them. Gunshots followed, disappearing into the night as Marco accelerated. Meanwhile, Luciano stood over his would-be assassins, phone pressed to his ear. "Report," he demanded. "Complications," Marco answered, the motorcycle engine nearly drowning his words. Antonio's men found the compound. Valentina was working with them. And Serena. With me. Shaken but alive. Relief flooded Luciano's chest, quickly followed by cold rage. Valentina betrayed us? Worse. She was working with Enzo before the restaurant hit. This goes back further than we thought. The revelation struck like a physical blow. His own sister had orchestrated everything, his assassination attempt, Serena's supposed death, all of it. "Where are you headed?" Luciano asked, already moving toward his car. "The old boathouse. 2 hours if we're not followed. I'll be there in 1. As Luciano drove through the night, his thoughts turned to Serena, alive, fighting, coming back to him against all odds. The woman who'd taken a bullet meant for him, the woman who'd seen past his darkness. And now everyone he'd ever crossed was hunting them both. You can feel the walls closing in, can't you? Luciano and Serena, separated for months, are finally about to reunite, but with enemies closing in from every direction. The most dangerous moment is still ahead. Subscribe now to witness their reunion and discover if their love is strong enough to survive the storm that's coming. After everything they've endured, don't you want to see them together again? The safe house wasn't safe anymore. Serena crouched behind abandoned crates at the harbour, Marco's blood staining her hands as she pressed against his gunshot wound. "Go," he urged through gritted teeth. "They're coming!" "Not without you," she insisted, though they both knew the truth. The footsteps were getting closer. Carlo Visconti's men had tracked them across 3 districts. Marco pressed a small key into her palm. "Storage locker 217, downtown terminal. Everything you need is there." His eyes locked with hers. "He's not the monster they claim. Remember that." Serena squeezed his hand before slipping away into the shadows. The gunshots that followed told her Marco had given his final sacrifice. Miles away, Luciano stood in Valentina's empty office, rage cooling into something more dangerous as he methodically went through her files. The evidence was extensive and damning. His sister had been plotting against him for years, aligning with anyone who shared her goal. The Viscontis, Enzo, even their cousin Antonio. But why? The answer came buried in her personal journal. A name, Michael Rossi. Valentina's fiancé, executed 5 years ago for betraying the Benedetti family, executed by Luciano himself. His phone rang. An unknown number. "I'm at the storage locker," Serena's voice came through, steady despite everything. "There are newspaper articles here about you, about changes in your organization, charitable donations, legitimate businesses. Were you really trying to leave it all behind?" Luciano closed his eyes, her voice washing over him like a balm. "After I lost you, nothing else mattered." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "Marco died protecting me," she finally said. "He told me you weren't the monster they claim." "I've done things I can't take back," Luciano admitted. "But with you, I wanted to be different." Another silence. Then, "Tomorrow is the anniversary of the shooting, of when we met." "I know." "The restaurant reopened last month." Her voice softened. "I'm going back, to where it started." The line went dead, leaving Luciano staring at his phone, heart pounding with something he'd forgotten how to feel. Hope. You feel it too, don't you? That pull of destiny drawing Serena and Luciano back to where it all began. After months of separation, lies, and betrayal, they're about to face each other again. Can you really walk away now, just when they're so close? Subscribe to witness their reunion, because some moments are too powerful to miss. The restaurant looked different now, brighter lights, new paint, different staff, but Luciano felt the ghosts as he entered, nodding to the security team stationed discreetly around the perimeter. 1 year ago, he had bled out on this floor. 1 year ago, a waitress with kind eyes had saved him, changing everything. He chose the same corner table back to the wall facing the entrance. Old habits. His fingers tapped restlessly against his glass of untouched whiskey. Would she come? The door opened at exactly 8 o'clock. Serena stepped inside, hesitating at the threshold. Her hair was longer now, and there was a new hardness in her stance, the posture of someone who had learned to look over her shoulder. But her eyes, when they swept the room and found his, were the same. Time slowed as they looked at each other across the crowded restaurant. 1 beat, 2 beats. Neither moved. Then Serena started walking toward him, weaving between tables just as she had that first night. Only this time she wasn't carrying plates. This time she knew exactly who waited for her. 3 tables away. 2. 1. "You came," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Luciano stood slowly. "I never left. Not really." His hand reached for hers, their fingers almost touching. The window behind them shattered. A spray of glass, people screaming, the unmistakable shape of a grenade bouncing across the floor. Luciano moved without thinking, pulling Serena down behind an overturned table as the explosion rocked the restaurant. His body covered hers, shielding her as debris rained down. "Stay low," he ordered, pulling his gun. His security team was already returning fire through the broken windows. "How did they find us?" Serena gasped, clutching his arm. "They've been watching both of us," Luciano realized, waiting for exactly this. They crawled toward the kitchen, bullets striking the floor around them. Through smoke and chaos, they made it to the back exit, emerging into the alley where Luciano's car waited. As they sped away, Serena finally broke the silence. I thought you were letting me go. When I woke up in Valentina's clinic and you never came. I thought you were dead. Luciano's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. I would have torn the world apart to find you if I'd known. What happens now? She asked quietly. Luciano looked at her. This woman who had taken a bullet for him, who had survived his sister's manipulation, who had returned to him despite everything. Now I stop running from who I am, he said, his voice hardening with resolve. I tried to leave this life behind, but to protect you, I'll embrace it one last time. You've waited for this moment, Serena and Luciano finally reunited, only to be thrust back into danger. Their story has survived bullets, betrayal, and separation, but the greatest test is still ahead. Don't you need to see how far they'll go to protect each other? Subscribe now to witness what love can endure when tested by fire and blood. They barely made it 10 miles before the roadblock. One moment they were speeding through empty streets. The next, Luciano was slamming the brakes as a sleek black car cut across their path. Get down, he shouted to Serena, reaching for his gun. But the figure that stepped from the car wasn't Antonio or Carlo's men. It was Valentina, her face bruised, gun aimed steadily at her brother. Enough running, Luciano, she called. This ends tonight. Serena placed a hand on Luciano's arm as he prepared to fire. Wait, she whispered. Let me talk to her. Against every instinct, Luciano lowered his window as Serena leaned forward. He killed Michael, Valentina said, her voice breaking. My fiancé. Did he tell you that? Serena's eyes shifted to Luciano, questioning. Michael was feeding information to the Gambinos, Luciano responded coldly. His betrayal cost 7 of our men their lives. He was trying to get us out. Valentina's hand trembled on her gun. He found a way for us to leave, to have a normal life, and you killed him for it. Understanding dawned on Serena's face. So you worked with Enzo to kill your brother. An eye for an eye. I wanted him to feel what I felt, Valentina admitted, to lose someone he loved. That was you? Luciano's voice turned deadly quiet. You're the reason Serena almost died. I never meant for her to get hurt, Valentina insisted. I saved her life. After putting it in danger, Serena countered, you kept me prisoner for months, drugged me. I used me as bait. Valentina's eyes filled with tears. You don't understand what it's like to lose everything. I do, Serena said gently. I lost my mother, my education, my future. But revenge didn't cross my mind. Something in Valentina's expression shifted. The gun lowered slightly. That's when the first bullet hit the car. Carlo's men emerged from the shadows, guns blazing. Luciano pulled Serena down as the windshield shattered. Valentina, get down! He shouted, instinctively trying to protect his sister despite everything. Valentina stood frozen in the crossfire, her gun now pointed at Carlo's approaching figure. In that moment, she had to choose her revenge or her brother's life. The bond of family runs deeper than betrayal, doesn't it? Valentina stands at the crossroads of vengeance and forgiveness while bullets fly. Can she set aside years of hatred to stand with her brother against a common enemy? Subscribe now to witness her choice and see if blood truly is thicker than water, because the most painful wounds are often inflicted by those we love the most. This way. Luciano led them through the hidden passage, supporting Valentina's weight. The bullet in her shoulder had missed anything vital, but blood soaked her shirt, leaving a trail behind them. They emerged in the old Benedetti family hunting lodge, a fortress disguised as a rustic cabin, nestled in dense forest 30 miles from the city. How did you know this was here? Serena asked, helping Valentina onto the couch. My father brought us here as children, Luciano explained, securing the entrances. Before everything changed, Valentina laughed weakly. Before he taught you to kill instead of hunt deer? Outside, car engines broke the forest silence. Carlo had followed their trail. They'll surround us completely, Luciano said, checking his ammunition. 1 gun each, limited bullets. Serena moved to the window, studying the approaching men. There's at least 20 of them. Against 3 of us, Valentina muttered. Great odds. Surprisingly, Serena smiled. Actually, I have an idea. Both siblings stared as she quickly outlined a plan that was either brilliant or suicidal. "Where did you learn to think like this?" Luciano asked, impressed despite the dire situation. "I grew up in the worst neighborhood in the city," Serena replied. "You learn to be creative when you're outnumbered." As Carlo's men closed in, they set her plan in motion. Valentina, despite her injury, positioned herself on the second floor with clear sightlines. Luciano took the main entrance while Serena prepared the final element. The first attackers breached the door to find Luciano waiting. His shots were precise, economical, the disciplined violence of a man protecting what mattered most. When they fell back to regroup, Serena struck. The propane tanks from the lodge's kitchen, strategically placed and ignited, created a wall of fire that split Carlo's forces. In the chaos, Carlo himself appeared, gun aimed at Luciano. "I've waited years for this," Carlo snarled. The shot rang out, but it wasn't Carlo who fired. From her perch above, Valentina had made her choice. Carlo fell, shock freezing on his face, but his finger squeezed the trigger as he dropped. The bullet found its mark, burying itself in Luciano's chest. "No!" Serena's scream cut through the gunfire as she ran to him. Blood bloomed across his shirt as she cradled him, a mirror of the night she'd taken a bullet for him. His eyes found hers, a faint smile touching his lips. "Looks like you're saving me again," he whispered. You've witnessed their desperate stand against overwhelming odds, Luciano, Serena, and Valentina fighting together despite their painful past. Now, with Luciano bleeding in Serena's arms, everything hangs in the balance. After all they've survived, could this be the end? Subscribe now to discover if love can triumph over fate, because some stories deserve to be followed to their final breath. Blood soaked through the makeshift bandage as Serena pressed harder against Luciano's chest. His breathing had grown shallow, his skin pale beneath his tan. "Stay with me," she commanded, echoing the words she'd spoken 1 year ago in that restaurant. "Don't you dare leave me now." Valentina appeared beside her, arm hanging uselessly at her side. The roads are clear. Antonio's men scattered when Carlo fell. Together they carried Luciano to the car, his weight nearly unbearable between them. The drive to the private clinic passed in tense silence, broken only by Serena's whispered prayers and promises. 3 days later, Luciano opened his eyes to find Serena asleep in the chair beside his hospital bed, her hand clasping his. When she felt him stir, her eyes flew open. "You stayed," he whispered, voice rough from disuse. "Always," she replied simply. The weeks that followed brought change that rippled through the city. Luciano didn't dismantle his empire as he'd once planned. Instead, he transformed it. "Power doesn't disappear," he explained to Serena one night as they reviewed blueprints for a community center in her old neighborhood. "It transfers. Better it stays with someone who understands its cost." The Benedetti organization shifted. Illegal operations shut down, legitimate businesses expanded. Territories became communities under protection rather than control. Valentina returned too, her hatred softened by near death and shared purpose. The siblings would never fully heal their wounds, but they found a fragile peace in building something new from the ashes of their past. "You changed him," Valentina told Serena one afternoon as they watched Luciano speak with former rivals, now cautious allies. "No," Serena corrected her. "I just showed him who he already was beneath the armor." 6 months after the gunfight at the lodge, Luciano and Serena stood together in the restaurant where they first met. Only now they weren't boss and waitress. They were partners, equals. The restaurant had been rebuilt, renamed, reborn, just like them. "I never believed in second chances," Luciano said, his hand finding hers across the table where he'd once bled out in her arms. "Until you gave me one." Serena smiled, the scar on her chest a permanent reminder of the bullet she'd taken for him. Some people are worth saving. Around them, the restaurant hummed with new life and possibility, a bridge between his world and hers, between who they had been and who they could become together. Their story wasn't perfect. It was scarred, complicated, written in blood and sacrifice. But it was theirs. and against all odds, they had survived to tell it. You've witnessed their entire journey, from that first fateful gunshot to this moment of hard-won peace. Luciano and Serena's story proves that love can flourish in the darkest places, that redemption is possible even for those who believe they're beyond saving. If their story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Subscribe now and share in the comments what you believe happens next for them. Because some love stories deserve to be remembered long after the telling is done.